Training zones. What zones have you got? It depends who you speak to. You've got zone 1, zone 2, zone 3, you've got zone 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, etc, etc. Sometimes zone 7, depending on whether you're biking or running, etc, etc. You've got people saying, "Oh, just training zone 5 and zone 1 and 2, blah, blah, blah." What zones are there and how do you train with them? If you've got a smartwatch, then it kind of makes it a little bit easy for you. In their loading, and they do confuse it a little bit, in Garmin, for example, you'll have aerobic, high aerobic and anaerobic, okay? That's really the same as like breaking it down into 5 zones, but they're only kind of using 3 specific areas, which is probably about right. And so when you're kind of capitalizing on your training, you can look at your training as if it is in 3 zones, okay? The base work, the middle of the road work, and then the fine-tuning part of VO2 max sessions at the end, okay? When you're looking at, for example, your heart rate on your heart rate monitor on your watch, then it will go blue, green, amber, red, okay? Now, Garmin use a bit of a percentage, I think, against your VO2 max, so it slightly differs from what I'm going to be explaining now, but here at Elite Outdoor Fitness, it fits in with the Garmin kind of way that they work in their heart rate zones, and it's something to kind of that you can use all the time, even if you're a novice, and going all the way through, which is working between establishing firstly what you think your maximum heart rate is, and most of the time people aren't very good at determining that because they're not working that hard, because they can't, because they're not fit and strong enough to do that at the beginning, okay? But it's kind of getting a rough idea, and we can certainly help you with that, so that you're working 65 to 75 in the mitochondria blue zone, okay, which is your base work, and a little bit of your efficiency, which is from 75 to 82%, and then 82 to 88%, which is the amber, which is lactate threshold area, and then 82 and upwards VO2 max, okay? That doesn't mean that you're not benefiting from VO2 max when you're doing LSD work or efficiency work or even lactate threshold work, because you are. You're making huge benefits on everything really when you're kind of working at any level. The difference is there's always a good sweet spot in training. If you're going to be working at mitochondria, work and get the most out of it by working in mitochondria. If you want efficiency range, which is really kind of putting the pace down and working relatively uncomfortable for a period of time in about zone 2, then work in zone 2. If you're looking to influence your lactate threshold range and coming into the VO2 max a little bit, then work in that zone, okay? Lactate threshold or VO2 max, okay? There's a time and place to work in different zones at different times, but generally speaking, the science behind it is that if you separate all those zones, you get a lot more out of your training, okay? Right, what zones and when? At the beginning of your training, and this is what I do because it's pretty flipping linear, is just section it into 3 different segments, okay? Your first block, and that might even be 3 weeks and a deload, 3 weeks and a deload, 3 weeks and a deload, and then your second block, which might be 3 weeks deload, 2 weeks deload, something like that, it's just an example, and then your third block, which might only be 2 weeks deload, or 3 week deload, 2 weeks deload, or even 1 week and then a deload, and then you're racing, okay? Whatever form it takes, you're kind of segmenting it into 3 areas. In the first area, primarily, the most of your training is done in zone 1 and maybe a little bit of zone 2, which is the blue and the green. You won't go far wrong, especially if you're a novice, okay? And this is all determined by how much physical exercise you've done in your life, etc, etc. But I'm just giving you the generic kind of formula that will work for pretty much everybody, okay? So you do your base work fitness, everything that's going to build your mitochondria, your energy levels, and get you used to running or being active for the period of time that you need to for your goal. And you're pretty much 85, 90% of your way there once you've finished segment 1 and you're moving into segment 2 of your training, okay? That's what I do. And then when you move into segment 2, you're taking a little bit more out of your efficiency range and maybe a little bit of your lactate threshold range. And then in segment 3, you're primarily focusing on a lot of the percentages on VO2 max and lactate threshold. And this means the priority when you're in the latter stages is just fine-tuning. It doesn't mean that most of your training are in those zones, but certainly compared to the previous 2, then a lot more training is done in those zones. You're not really making much more efficiencies in the zones that you're working hard at the beginning, like getting the distance in your legs. But what will happen is because you're focusing in on lactate threshold, efficiency, economy, lactate threshold, and also VO2 max, it will increase your speed much later. There are a couple of things that you can use on your Garmin watch, which, for example, is on your VO2 max area. And what that will do is when you go into that, it will give you your VO2 max. Mine's only sat at 49 at the moment. But you can go down, it will give you your VO2 max in cycling if you've got that set up, your lactate threshold speed at what heart rate, and also your 5K, your 10K, your half marathon, and your marathon prediction, okay? And this is a great way of just ensuring that you're working in the right areas. So I've just finished my first block and I'm now moving into the second block. I've actually got about 4 blocks because I've just got a little bit more time, and so that's what I've been doing. But I've predominantly been concentrating on my base work. I've been doing a little bit of lactate threshold and a minute amount of just ticking over at my VO2 max, so that when I start my second block of training, I can start doing a little bit more in those zones, okay? But I'm up to speed. I'm up to 20, 22 miles at the moment, and with weight as well. So I've got the distance that I need, because I'm only going to be racing actually at maybe 13 to 15 miles with weight in about 3 or 4 months' time. And what you'll find on your stats in the first block is that your 5K, 10K pace are pretty poor. And your VO2 max actually is probably at the lower end of what it normally is, okay? And this is kind of where you want it to be. Because what you're going to be doing then is going into the second block, and like I said, the last block, if you're going to be doing it in that respect, is you're going to primarily be looking at increasing the speed and the intensity and how hard you can work and how long you can work for, and getting your body used to doing that, okay? And that will start influencing your half marathon speed on your predictive one, and also your 10K and your 5K. So as you move through the months, and as you move through doing your base work, and then working a little bit harder at lactate threshold, and then fine-tuning VO2 max type training, even though you've been doing all of those sessions from the beginning, you are prioritising the slightly higher levels of that as you move through. And then you're putting it all together as a package at the end and concentrating on the specificity of training and making sure that you're deliberately training how you want to race and what for the events is actually going to be, okay? But how you can work with that is in the first block, you're going to find that your 5K and your 10K speed isn't actually there yet, and your VO2 max is low. But when you start going into the middle block, you're going to start getting running economy and efficiency kind of going, and you're going to be working at your efficiency range, your lactate threshold range and VO2 max range. Your VO2 max is going to start going up, your lactate threshold is going to go up, and the speed at the distance that you had before, you're going to increase your speed without putting any extra effort into it in that regard, okay? Your LSDs will start to become quicker, your time over the hills will start to come quicker, and then you'll see your half marathon pace start to come down. So initially you're going to see that your 5K speed is pretty poor. It's as in this is how long it takes you to run it, and it might be like 22 minutes or something like it says for me. And my 10K is poor by saying it's 40, 42, 45 minutes. But my half marathon and my marathon pace looks actually not too bad. And those are the ones that are starting to dip down. And then once you start going into the middle sessions, you'll see that your half marathon pace, your 10K pace starts coming down. And then also just before you race, your 5K pace would have started to shoot down quite a bit. And so your marathon pace, your half marathon pace, your 10K pace, and your 5K pace is all looking good. You deload, you taper, and you're on your event. Hope this helped. Thanks for listening. Chat soon.